All right, everybody please stand up. Get in fours. So you make a little thing with 4 people. Get in a 4. I say just 4 of you in a circle or something like that. So you touch in together in some way. All right, you're in a 4. Hands up if you're in a 4. Okay. Hands up in a 4. Great, now you're in a 4. Now, point at one of you. Just point at one of you. Okay. And then the other 3 sit down. That's it. The other 3 sit down. Those people, somebody standing up. Okay. All right, everybody shush. Everybody shush. Look at the people standing up. According to the figures that we had, the Office for National Statistics says 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, and many agree the true figure is much higher due to underreporting. So that's, the thing downstairs says worldwide it's 1 in 3. In England and Wales it's 1 in 4. Please take a seat. In 2016, 2 women a week were killed by a current or ex-partner in England and Wales. 2 women a week. It's not okay. No. Since 2010, the number of domestic violence cases registered by councils and the police has risen dramatically at the same time as local authorities' spending on domestic refuges has been cut by nearly a quarter. That's not okay. I was in Newton Heath, part of Manchester, many years ago, and as a police officer, and at that time, to rape your wife was not a crime, and a man had it shows the law can change, and it is good that law can change, but at the time it was not a crime to rape your wife. This man was on bail for consistently abusing and beating his wife, and he'd just gone in while he was on bail and raped her again. I ended up chasing him through all the gardens and caught him, and had a little and to be honest with you, I was glad to have a fight with him about it before he was arrested. But then so often I would go back to a domestic abuse report. It wasn't the case in this one, but very often you would find a woman who'd been savagely beaten or abused in some way, or even mentally or emotionally. We know that they're looking to change the law and all of those in terms of what defines abuse. But the thing that I would often her say afterwards, maybe a day or 2 afterwards, was, "It's okay." And it's like, no, it's not okay. And you're trying to help people to realise it's not okay. Your level of what is okay has changed from what it used to be. That used to not be okay, but now it's okay, and it isn't okay. And there needs some other people to stand up and say, no, that thing that has become okay is not okay. Yeah. In the church, I was in a previous church down in the south many years ago. There was a pastor who just preached, and some of the stuff that he'd said I wasn't quite sure about, and it seemed to be he indicating in some way that the church, that women should just be submitting a little bit like we just heard, and I ended about marriage at all costs, and women basically should stay in a marriage no matter what. That seemed to be the implication that was being said. And I got up after him and I said, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to just disagree with the previous speaker and say that I think there comes a point at which if what's supposed to bring life is bringing death, if what's supposed to be bringing freedom is bringing slavery, and somebody's locked into that, then that's not okay. And I said that, and then afterwards a couple came up to me, this older couple, and they were like in tears, and they said, "We can't believe you said that." And I thought they were offended by it. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, well, our daughter, she's married to a guy. She's been married to a guy for like 15 years, and they've got a couple of small children. And we know that he is assaulting her. And the way that he ended up describing her, what was going on, the emotional and the physical and the sexual abuse that was now going on as normal, as being okay in that relationship. And they were saying, we're saying to her, actually, keep praying for him. We're supporting you, and you should stay in the marriage above all costs and all of that. And I said, no, it's not okay, it's not right. That's not what she signed up for. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I'm doing a wedding later on today. The reason I've got to leave after this is I'm going doing a wedding. But there's going to be 2 people who are going to talk about for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, so death do us part, and all that kind of thing. But we don't want death to part us because one person killed the other person. It's not. That isn't what they're signing up for in doing that. And it is for better, for worse, but not because I want to treat you worse. That's right. All of those things that people think it is. The church sometimes colludes with that and ends up making people feel bad about actually. No, I don't think this is okay. And other people will say, "Oh no, it is okay." And women end up very often, brutalised as a result of that. I ended up saying to this couple, "Please tell her it's not okay." And she ended up leaving her. That day, they went and got her, and they moved her out, and they brought her back down to Kent, and they brought her and lived with her, and now she is married many years on to a man who loves her, to somebody who looks after her children properly. And I don't know what happened to the other guy. To be honest with you, I'm not bothered. He's chosen his own path and his own way, but the person that I've got a duty of care for was really clear in that circumstance. In this city, I've not been here very long. I do a thing sometimes on a Monday evening when anybody from the church can just come and chat about anything. And there's a lady who came along, and she was from a black majority church, and she'd been going to that church in the city. I don't know the name of it, but she'd been part of it. But she, and I'm not saying this was just there, but I know it is something I've seen that does happen in black majority churches quite often, because of cultural issues and stuff doesn't get addressed. But she was saying how about her husband had been beating her for years, and that she'd gone to the pastor, and the pastors of the church and the elders have basically put her under discipline.
What?
They put her under discipline because she wasn't submitting to her husband properly.
Crazy.
This is what was going on, and this was, and I had to say to it, no, that's not okay. It's just not okay at all, and it's still not okay. And I do believe in marriage, and I believe in forgiveness, but where there are biblical grounds for divorce, when you're talking about one partner treating the other partner like a slave, nobody needs to be forced to stay in that, and the churches need to be the ones to say it's not okay.
Absolutely.
It's not okay. I get angry about that, and sometimes the problem is, as a man, my anger can sometimes come out in wrong ways. You know, men and women's brains are wired up differently and all that kind of stuff. And a man's mind, when it gets angry, gets flooded with testosterone, and you're not able to think rationally as a result of that. And so, the way in which I've sometimes dealt with this is just to get angry about it. But the problem is that anger as a man can sometimes make it even worse rather than making it better. And there's ways that we can tackle these things actually, I need to learn more from women about how to do this, because women's brains are wired for connectivity and social and sorting things out properly, rather than me just getting up and wanting to fight it. We talk about fighting stuff, but ultimately there's this myth. They call it the myth of redemptive violence. So many of these films that we watch, that I like to watch, the violent films I like to watch, end up with a man at the end going and killing somebody for doing something bad. And we've just got these loops of endless violence in the way that we think violence will stop violence, and it's crazy. And it's not the way of Jesus Christ. And it's not okay. And so I never just want to give my opinion. I always want to look some way at the Bible on this topic. And there's not much, to be honest with you. I know we just heard about what Elaine talked about, some things to do with slavery and those things. But I've looked, honest, I can't actually find specific things, that many, about domestic violence or domestic abuse. But of course we've got the defining acts of the Old Testament in Exodus, which is a group of people being delivered out of slavery, and that shows what God's heart is. You look at the words of the prophets, people like Isaiah and Jeremiah, the words that God puts in their mouths, and pastors and leaders who want to smooth over or cover up or in any way excuse abuse and offer cheap grace in their congregations, are in danger of being judged like the false shepherds that were spoken about when God said, "You've healed the wound of my people lightly by declaring peace, peace where there is no peace." I think that happens. I think somebody comes and they come to their church and they're a bit vulnerable and they're open and they try and share something, and people just want to smooth it over and pray for peace over something that God wants to go to war against in a way. He wants to destroy that. He wants to go into that in a way that it won't be allowed to happen anymore. And just praying for peace, 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 in the end is there is no peace with that kind of thing. And the God that I read about here in the Bible is a good shepherd. He's the protector of the weak. He's the one who spreads his wings of love over a hurting person. Jesus Christ elevated women like nobody else ever had done before or since. And the church, if it's going to be like him, must be doing the same kind of thing. But there's only one domestic abuse story that I keep coming back to, and it's in 1 Samuel chapter 25. There's three characters. There's David and Nabal and Abigail. I don't know if you remember the story, but it says there's this man called Nabal who had property, and he was very wealthy, very rich in all kinds of ways, but certainly not rich in relationships. He says he had a beautiful wife, an intelligent wife. Her name was Abigail. That name, by the way, means father's joy. I know that because it's my daughter's middle name. And so she's the father's joy, but she's locked in this relationship. And again, she probably wouldn't have chosen this marriage, because in that situation she would have been married, and that would have been a choice that was made for her. But she's married, it says. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean. And then David goes to this guy and basically says, "We've been looking after your your sheep and your shepherds during this time, and now it's harvest time. Would you like to share any of your blessings with us? And it says, Nabal, who's just like this angry man, he says, who is David? Why should I take my bread and water and give it to him? And when David hears this, as a man, he rises up in violence. He says, strap on your swords, guys, we're going to go and fight him. And he takes a whole bunch of people to go and fight against this nasty man. But then one of the servants told Abigail about it. David sent messengers to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Disaster is now hanging over us. It's like, you see, an abusive person like this ends up affecting everybody else around them and spoiling it for them too, all of the rest of the family. It says Abigail acted quickly. She took loaves of bread and wine and sheep and cakes, and she went out to David. But she did not tell her husband Nabal, because there's a secrecy thing going on here. And when Abigail saw David, she fell at his feet and said, please pay no attention to that wicked man Nabal. He's just like his name. His name means fool. That's what Nabal means. And folly goes with him. And she smooths over David's ruffled feathers beautifully. I think a lot of women end up having to do this for somebody in a relationship. They have to go and say, oh, he didn't really mean it. Yeah. It's okay, really. It's just the way he is. And sometimes he's like that with the kids and he shouts at them, but he loves them really. Yeah. You know, I think that a woman can sometimes find herself in this position, which Abigail is talking to David and trying to placate and trying to make it all okay and trying to, in some way, keep the whole show on the road for the family so that the family doesn't look bad and people don't, you know, and all of that. And the woman can end up in this situation. And David, eventually, he changes his mind and he says, okay, thank you for doing this and turning me from violence. Go on your way in peace. But when Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a king's banquet. He was in high spirits and very drunk. Do we see a pattern here as well as part of this? She's out sorting out the mess that he's making with his anger. She comes back home, he's drunk. She told him nothing about it until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him about it, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. It doesn't say he died. It says the Lord struck him. You know, well, what's God's view on this? You've got to think about that. It seems to me, as I read this, God punished him. God did judge him. He's like, oh, we mustn't judge. Well, God did. Nabal, his name means fool. I was thinking about how you could work on the name. Nabal, it can mean nasty, N, abusive, A, bullying, B, angry, A, L, loud. He's got a hot temper. He's got a beautiful wife that he doesn't deserve. He's successful in life and business and in the eyes of everybody else, but not at home. And his name means fool. And that's what he ends up being. And it's not okay. And I just have that picture in my mind of Abigail trying to gloss it over and keep it sweet and making excuses and saying that, oh, that's just the way he is and please excuse him. It's okay. It's not okay. It isn't okay. And a woman shouldn't be in the position of being made to try and make it look okay, to try and keep things together. And actually, in the end, God does step in and do something about it. And there's a kind of happy ending. I'm not sure how happy it is, because she ends up getting tagged into David's harem then and becoming wife number 3. And David, as we know, wasn't brilliant with women. But this is often a pattern that repeats itself, and it's going from one bad relationship into another one, because this is where she sees her this is all I'm worth now as a result of this. And so many women end up being trapped into these kind of relationships, and it's not okay. And that's why we're here, and that's why we need to pray. Amen. Amen. Thanks, everybody.